I stood alone in my cap and gown, scanning the empty auditorium seats where my family should have been sitting. Graduation day from business school, the moment I had worked toward for 3 grueling years, and not one of them showed up. My parents, Greg and Susan, my brother Marcus, and my sister Diana had all chosen to attend Marcus's amateur baseball tournament instead. A recreational game mattered more than my MBA achievement. That crushing realization taught me everything I needed to know about my place in their priorities. Fast forward 8 years later, I had built Heritage Suites into a $220 million hotel empire. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my father after 3 years of complete silence. The message appeared on my screen while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office overlooking downtown Seattle. The view stretched across Elliott Bay, where cargo ships moved like distant toys against the gray December sky. My assistant Emma had just brought me my afternoon coffee when I saw those words that made my blood freeze. Family dinner at 7:30 p.m. Important discussion. Your attendance is required. Required, not requested, not invited. Required as if I were still that eager, 22-year-old desperate for their approval. I set my phone down and tried to focus on the spreadsheet displaying our latest property acquisitions. Heritage Suites had grown from my first renovated Victorian Inn in Portland to 37 boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest. Each location reflected my vision of combining historical charm with modern luxury creating spaces, where guests felt genuinely welcomed rather than processed through corporate efficiency. Emma knocked and entered without waiting for permission, which meant she had news that could not wait. Her expression carried the particular excitement she reserved for major developments. "Janelle, you need to see this immediately," she said, placing a glossy magazine on my desk. Forbes. My photograph filled the entire cover, standing in front of our flagship Seattle property. The headline read, "America's Youngest Hotel Mogul. How Janelle Built a $220 million Empire Before 35. My stomach dropped. The article had published this morning, which meant my family's sudden contact was not coincidental timing. They had seen the magazine, learned about my financial success, and immediately reached out after years of complete silence. I thought about that graduation day when I had saved the front row seats with small bouquet arrangements, hoping they would surprise me by showing up despite their initial refusal. I remembered checking my phone every few minutes, convinced they had changed their minds and were running late. The ceremony lasted 2 hours, and I spent every minute of it watching the door, waiting for familiar faces that never appeared. After graduation, I had called each of them separately. Marcus told me his tournament was more important because he might get scouted by college coaches. Diana said she had promised to watch Marcus play and could not disappoint him the way I was trying to make her disappoint him by attending my graduation instead. My parents explained that family meant supporting each other's dreams, and Marcus's baseball dreams needed their support more than my academic achievement, which I had already accomplished, whether they attended or not. That night, I had made a decision that shaped everything that followed. I would build something so successful, so undeniably impressive, that they would regret their choice forever. Not for revenge, but to prove my worth to myself. Emma was still standing beside my desk, waiting for my reaction to the Forbes cover. I realized she had been watching my face while I processed the magazine and the text message simultaneously. "They have perfect timing," I said finally. "Your family..." 3 years of silence, and they reach out the same day Forbes publishes this story. I gestured to the magazine. "They want something." Emma had worked with me for 4 years and understood my family situation. She knew about the graduation day abandonment, the subsequent years of minimal contact, and the eventual complete cutoff when I had refused to loan Marcus money for what he claimed was a business investment, but was actually gambling debt. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. I looked at my phone again, then at the Forbes cover, then out at the Seattle skyline, where my success was literally visible in the form of Heritage Suites properties dotting the urban landscape. A plan began forming in my mind, one that would surprise everyone involved, including myself. "Yes," I said. I am going to attend their dinner, but first I need you to cancel my meetings for tomorrow and book me a flight to Phoenix tonight." Emma nodded and headed toward the door, then paused. "Should I prepare anything special for this trip?" I smiled for the first time since receiving the text message. "Actually, yes. Contact our attorney Jennifer Park and have her prepare some documents I will need. Also call our private investigation firm. I want a complete financial report on my entire family by tomorrow afternoon." As Emma left to handle these requests, I opened the Forbes article and began reading about my own life through the journalist's perspective. The story painted me as a determined entrepreneur who had overcome early challenges to build an impressive business empire. What it did not mention was that those early challenges had included learning that blood relationships meant nothing without mutual respect and genuine care. Tomorrow evening, I would discover whether my family had learned that same lesson or whether they were about to provide me with the final proof that some bridges should remain permanently burned. The rental car's GPS guided me through neighborhoods I had not seen in 3 years, past strip malls and chain restaurants that epitomized suburban Phoenix sprawl. December in Arizona meant perfect 70-degree weather, but the familiar landscape felt oppressive under the clear blue sky. Every street corner held memories of a childhood spent feeling invisible within my own family. I parked across from my parents' house and sat for several minutes observing details that revealed more than any private investigator's report could capture. The front yard's desert landscaping had withered into brown stubble, suggesting they had stopped paying for professional maintenance. Paint peeled from the garage door in long strips, and the decorative window boxes my mother once tended with obsessive care now contained only dried weeds and sun-bleached plastic flowers. The briefcase beside me contained documents that would change everything, but I wanted to understand the complete picture before I revealed my hand. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma confirming that our private investigators had delivered their report to my hotel suite. I would review their findings after dinner, comparing their research with my own observations. I grabbed the briefcase and walked toward the front door, noting how the concrete driveway had developed significant cracks that created tripping hazards. The doorbell played the same 4-note chime from my childhood, triggering an involuntary flash of coming home from school to an empty house because everyone was at Marcus's practice or Diana's dance lessons. My father, Greg, opened the door and I was startled by how much he had aged. His hair had gone completely gray, and deep lines creased his face around his eyes and mouth. His construction worker's hands showed arthritis swelling in the knuckles, and he moved with the careful stiffness of someone dealing with chronic back pain. "Janelle," he said, attempting a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You look successful." "Hello, Dad." I stepped inside, noting how the living room furniture appeared shabbier than I remembered. The carpet showed worn traffic patterns, and several family photos had been removed from the walls, leaving behind lighter rectangles where they once hung. My mother, Susan, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had always been petite, but now she seemed almost frail. Her work uniform from a local hotel chain suggested she had taken a job since I had last seen her, probably out of financial necessity rather than career ambition. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, avoiding direct eye contact. "Just like old times." Marcus appeared from the hallway, and the changes in him were even more dramatic. The athletic build he had maintained through his 20s had softened into the beginnings of a beer belly, and his face carried the particular puffiness that suggested too much drinking and too little sleep. He wore a wrinkled polo shirt and jeans with permanent stains around the pockets. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," he said, settling into his usual spot on the couch. "The famous hotel mogul." Diana entered last, carrying her 18-month-old daughter, Sophia. Diana had always been the most fashion-conscious member of our family, but tonight she wore discount store clothing that fit poorly and showed signs of multiple washings. Dark circles under her eyes suggested exhaustion that went beyond normal new mother fatigue. "Hi, Janelle," she said quietly. "Thanks for coming." The living room felt smaller than I remembered, crowded with mismatched furniture and cluttered with the accumulated debris of lives that had not progressed as planned. A stack of bills sat prominently on the coffee table, and I noticed several had red, past due stamps visible. "Should we sit down and talk before dinner?" Greg asked, gesturing toward the dining room. I followed them into the adjoining space where the table was set with our old everyday dishes, rather than the good china my mother used to display for special occasions. The centerpiece was a plastic poinsettia arrangement that had probably been purchased years ago and reused every holiday season since. We took our familiar seats around the table, recreating the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood. Greg at the head, Susan to his right, Marcus and Diana on one side, and me isolated on the opposite side. Even the seating arrangement reinforced my position as the outsider. So, Greg began clearing his throat with the nervous energy of someone about to make an important presentation. "We saw the magazine article." "Forbes," Susan added, as if I might not know which publication had featured me. "We had no idea your business had become so successful." Marcus leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Must be nice having all that money while your family struggles." I placed my briefcase on the floor beside my chair but did not open it yet. What kind of struggles? The question hung in the air while they exchanged glances, clearly having rehearsed this conversation, but uncertain about how to proceed now that the moment had arrived. Diana spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm behind on my rent. 3 months behind. My landlord filed an eviction notice last week. And my house," Marcus added with forced bravado, "I might lose my house. The bank wants $50,000 by January 15th, or they foreclose." I looked at my parents, waiting for their contribution to this list of financial disasters. Susan twisted the dish towel in her hands. "We took a second mortgage to help Marcus last year, but now we're struggling with our own payments. I had to take a part-time job at the Sunset Inn to help make ends meet." Greg nodded grimly. "Construction work has been slow this winter. I might get laid off after the new year." I absorbed this information while studying their faces, looking for signs of genuine distress versus calculated manipulation. What I saw was a combination of both, which made the situation more complex than simple greed or authentic desperation. "I see," I said finally, "and you thought I might be able to help." "Your family," Marcus said, leaning forward aggressively. "Family helps family. That's how it's supposed to work." "Is it?" I asked, opening my briefcase, because I seem to remember family working differently when I needed support. The room fell silent as I pulled out a thick folder of documents, placing it on the table between us. Their eyes fixed on the paperwork with the intensity of people who had been hoping for a checkbook, but were now facing something entirely unexpected. Before we discuss how family is supposed to work, I said, "I think we should examine how family has actually worked in our case." I opened the folder and spread several documents across the dining room table, watching their faces as they recognized bank statements, credit reports, and legal filings. The silence stretched uncomfortably while they processed the implications of my preparation. "Marcus," I said, sliding a series of bank statements in his direction, "your foreclosure situation is not due to job loss or medical bills or any of the unfortunate circumstances you implied. These records show $83,000 in withdrawals from Desert Diamond Casino Talking Stick Resort and Casino, Arizona over the past 2 years. His face flushed red, but he did not deny the evidence. "That's not what this is about." "Actually, it is exactly what this is about." I placed additional documents on the table. "Diana, your rent problems stem from credit card debt totaling $47,000, plus an ongoing investigation by the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office for suspected identity theft related to fraudulent card applications." Diana's eyes filled with tears, and she clutched Sophia closer to her chest. "I never meant for it to go that far. I just needed a few things for the baby, and then it spiraled out of control." I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, your second mortgage was the fourth time you have refinanced this house to cover Marcus's debts. You have also taken loans against Dad's retirement fund, exhausted Mom's inheritance from Grandma Ruth, and borrowed money from 11 different relatives over the past 5 years. Susan's voice cracked. We were just trying to keep our family together? By enabling destructive behavior instead of addressing it, I replied. Every time you bailed them out, you made their problems worse, not better, and now you want me to continue that pattern. Greg slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. You have more money than you could spend in a lifetime. We are not asking for charity. We are asking for help from our daughter. Are you... I reached into the briefcase again and pulled out a different set of documents. Because what I am about to offer you is help. Real help. The kind that actually solves problems instead of postponing them. I placed a property deed on the table, followed by architectural plans and business projections. Their confusion was evident as they tried to understand what they were looking at. 6 months ago, I purchased the Sunset Inn, where Mom works, I said. It was on the market for $900,000, but the owners accepted $750,000 because they needed a quick sale. I have plans to renovate it as the next Heritage Suites location, a full-service boutique hotel with conference facilities and a restaurant. Susan gasped. You bought my workplace. I bought a business opportunity that happens to be your current workplace. The renovation will take 8 months and create 47 permanent jobs when we reopen. I'm prepared to offer you the general manager position with a starting salary of $60,000 plus full benefits and profit sharing. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline, but I was not finished. Marcus, our construction partner, needs a facilities maintenance supervisor for the renovation project and ongoing hotel operations. $48,000 annually, with opportunities for advancement based on performance and sobriety. Marcus stared at the job description I had placed in front of him. What do you mean, sobriety? I mean, you will submit to random drug and alcohol testing, attend mandatory counseling sessions, and complete a gambling addiction rehabilitation program before you are eligible for employment. Diana, we will need a retail coordinator to manage our gift shop and coordinate with local artisans for hotel merchandise. $35,000 to start with childcare assistance, but only after you resolve your legal issues and complete financial management counseling. Diana wiped tears from her cheeks. You would give us jobs. I would give you opportunities to earn your way back to stability, I corrected. But there are conditions that are non-negotiable. Greg leaned forward. What conditions? I pulled out the final set of documents which detailed a comprehensive rehabilitation program I had spent months developing with addiction specialists and financial counselors. All 4 of you will participate in family therapy twice per week for the first year, then monthly for the second year. Marcus and Diana will attend their respective rehabilitation programs and submit to ongoing monitoring. Mom and Dad will attend financial literacy classes and meet with a counselor to address the enabling behaviors that created this crisis. Marcus pushed back from the table. You want us to jump through hoops like performing animals? I want you to address the underlying problems instead of just treating the symptoms. I said, the $50,000 you need for your house. That money will not save you. You will gamble it away within 6 months, then need another bailout. Diana's rent money will not solve her shopping addiction or legal troubles. Your parents' financial assistance will not teach them how to set healthy boundaries. Susan reached across the table toward me. But if we do not help them now, they will lose everything. They are going to lose everything anyway unless they change their behavior, I said gently. I am offering them a chance to rebuild their lives with dignity, steady income, and professional support, but it requires admitting that the current approach is not working. The room fell silent while they absorbed the full scope of what I was proposing. It was not the quick financial fix they had been expecting, but a complete restructuring of their family dynamics and individual relationships with money work and accountability. Diana broke the silence. What if we say yes to your program? What happens to our current debts and legal problems? I have attorneys standing by to negotiate payment plans with your creditors and represent you in the identity theft case, I said. Your debts will be consolidated into manageable monthly payments deducted from your paychecks over time. You will learn to live within your means while rebuilding your credit and legal standing. Marcus stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You want us to become your employees, attend your therapy sessions, and follow your rules. That is not family help. That is control. You are right, I said calmly. It is control. But it is the kind of control that leads to freedom, not the kind of control that keeps you trapped in cycles of crisis and dependency. Greg's face had been growing redder throughout my presentation. Just write us the check, Janelle. We are desperate here. We need help now, not some complicated program that might work eventually. I closed the folder and placed my hands flat on the table. There is no check. There is only the program I have outlined, which includes immediate housing assistance, legal representation, and employment opportunities, or there is nothing. The finality in my voice seemed to shock them into understanding that I was not negotiating. They could accept my terms or reject them, but there was no middle ground that involved me simply handing over money to continue the same destructive patterns. Diana looked around the table at her family members, then back at me. Can we think about it? You have until tomorrow morning, I said, standing and closing my briefcase. I have a flight back to Seattle at noon. If you decide to accept the program, we can begin immediately. If not, this is the last conversation we will ever have about your financial problems. As I walked toward the front door, I heard them beginning to argue among themselves about my offer. Marcus was already dismissing it as impossible, while Diana seemed genuinely interested in the possibility of legal assistance. My parents appeared torn between their desire for easy money and their recognition that their current situation was unsustainable. I stepped outside into the cool evening air and took a deep breath. The first phase of my plan was complete, but I had no idea whether they would accept my conditions or double down on their demands for unconditional financial support. Either way, I had made my position clear, and the next move was theirs. I had barely reached my rental car when I heard the front door slam open behind me. Marcus stormed out of the house, his face twisted with rage and something else I could not immediately identify. "Get back here," he shouted. "We are not done talking." I turned around slowly, keeping my briefcase firmly in my grip. "Actually, we are done. I made my offer and you can think about it overnight." "Think about it?" Marcus's voice cracked with disbelief. "You think you can waltz in here with your fancy clothes and your condescending attitude and dictate terms to us like we are children?" Diana appeared in the doorway behind him, still holding Sophia, who had started crying in response to the raised voices. My parents flanked her, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and desperate anxiety. "Marcus, calm down," Susan called. "The neighbors will hear." "Let them hear," he shot back. "Let everyone hear how our successful sister thinks she is too good to help her own family without making them dance for her entertainment." I walked back toward the house but stopped several feet away from Marcus, whose agitation was escalating beyond normal anger into something more volatile. "What exactly do you want from me?" "I want you to write a check for $50,000 so I can keep my house," he said. "I want you to give Diana money for her rent and help Mom and Dad with their mortgage. I want you to act like a sister instead of a business manager." "And then what happens in 6 months when you need another $50,000? I asked. Marcus grabbed a beer bottle from the porch railing and hurled it against the side of the house, where it shattered into brown glass fragments. "I am not some gambling addict. I had a few bad runs at the casino, but I can get it under control." "You have lost $83,000 in 2 years, I said. "That is not a few bad runs. That is a serious addiction that requires professional treatment." "Professional treatment," he repeated mockingly. "You sound just like that lawyer who told us we should sue you." The words hung in the air like a confession, and I saw my parents' faces go pale. Diana took a step backward into the house, clutching Sophia protectively. "What lawyer?" I asked quietly. Greg cleared his throat nervously. Marcus, maybe you should not. Should not what? Tell her the truth. Marcus laughed bitterly. Fine. You want to know the truth. We talked to a lawyer named Richard Walsh about whether we could force you to help us financially. He said families have legal obligations to support each other, especially when one member has significantly more resources than the others. My blood went cold. I had heard of inheritance fraud cases where con artists convinced desperate families they could claim money from successful relatives, but I had never imagined my own family would fall for such a scheme. What did this lawyer tell you to do? I asked. Diana spoke up from the doorway. He said we should document tonight's conversation to prove you acknowledged your ability to help us, but refused to do so. He said that could be evidence of family abandonment or financial abuse. I looked around at all of them, realizing the dinner invitation had been more calculated than I had imagined. Are you recording this conversation? Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, and I could see the voice memo app was active. We started recording when you walked in the door. Walsh said we needed evidence of your refusal to provide reasonable assistance to family members in crisis. Where is Walsh now? I asked. He is coming here tonight to collect the recordings and discuss our next steps. Greg said reluctantly. He should arrive any minute. As if summoned by our conversation, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in an expensive suit emerged from the driver's seat, carrying a leather portfolio that looked designed to impress potential victims. He was middle-aged with silver hair and the practiced smile of someone who made a living exploiting people's desperation. Perfect timing, he said, walking directly toward me with extended hand. You must be Janelle, Richard Walsh, attorney at law. I have been looking forward to meeting you. I did not shake his hand. What law firm do you work for, Mr. Walsh? Walsh and Associates, he replied smoothly. We specialize in family legal matters and asset protection. Asset protection, I repeated. Whose assets are you protecting? Your family's assets, of course. The emotional and financial investment they made in your education and early career development. The legal principle is quite clear. When family members sacrifice to support someone's advancement, they acquire a reasonable expectation of reciprocal assistance during times of need. Marcus stepped closer to Walsh, emboldened by the attorney's presence. See, we have legal rights here. You cannot just ignore your obligations to us. Walsh opened his portfolio and pulled out several documents. I have prepared a formal demand letter requesting $200,000 in immediate financial assistance, which represents a modest return on your family's investment in your success. If you agree to sign this settlement agreement tonight, we can avoid the unpleasantness of litigation. I examined the document he offered, noting several red flags in the language and formatting. This is very interesting, Mr. Walsh. Tell me, what is your state bar number? I beg your pardon. Your state bar number, the identification number assigned to you when you were admitted to practice law in Arizona. Walsh's confident expression flickered slightly. That information is not relevant to our discussion tonight. It is if you are practicing law without a license, I said, which is a felony in Arizona. The atmosphere on the porch shifted dramatically as everyone realized the implications of what I was suggesting. Walsh's practiced composure began to crack, revealing the predatory opportunist beneath the professional facade. I think there has been a misunderstanding, he said, stepping backward toward his car. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. Perhaps we should call the police and report attempted extortion, I replied, pulling my own phone from my purse. Walsh moved quickly toward his vehicle, but I had already started dialing 911. My family stood frozen on the porch, finally understanding they had been manipulated by a con artist who saw their desperation as an opportunity for profit. As Walsh's car disappeared down the street, Marcus slumped against the porch railing. He said it was legal. He said families had rights to share in each other's success. He lied to you, I said gently, and you were so desperate for money that you were willing to believe him. Diana started crying harder, bouncing Sophia in an attempt to calm both of them. What happens now? Are we in trouble with the police? I looked at each of them, seeing fear and shame replace the anger and entitlement they had displayed earlier. They had been victims of a scammer, but they had also been willing participants in a scheme to extort money from me. "That depends," I said, "on whether you are ready to accept the help I actually offered, or whether you want to continue looking for magical solutions that do not require any effort or change on your part." The choice was theirs, but I had a feeling Walsh's deception had finally shown them the difference between genuine assistance and false promises. I finished my call to the police and slipped my phone back into my purse, watching my family process the reality that their legal salvation had just fled into the night. The porch light cast long shadows across their faces, highlighting the exhaustion and defeat that had replaced their earlier defiance. "The police will be here in a few minutes," I said calmly. "We should go inside and discuss what actually happened here tonight." Marcus remained slumped against the porch railing, staring at the street where Walsh had disappeared. He seemed so legitimate. He knew all about inheritance law and family obligations. "Con artists always seem legitimate," I replied. "That is how they succeed in taking advantage of desperate people." We filed back into the living room where the dinner table still held the documents from my earlier presentation. Diana settled into a chair with Sophia, while my parents took their usual spots on the couch. Marcus remained standing, pacing nervously behind the furniture. "How much trouble are we in?" Greg asked quietly. "That depends on several factors," I said, opening my briefcase again. "But before the police arrive, there are some things you should know about tonight's events." I pulled out my own phone and showed them the screen where a call was still active. "This is my attorney, Jennifer Park. She's been listening to everything that happened here tonight through an open conference line." Their faces registered shock and confusion as they realized I had been recording the conversation just as they had been, but with professional legal oversight rather than amateur extortion attempts. "Jennifer," I said into the phone, "would you please explain the legal situation to my family?" Jennifer's voice came through the speaker clearly. "Good evening, everyone. What we witnessed tonight was attempted extortion, facilitated by criminal impersonation of an attorney. Mr. Walsh is not licensed to practice law in Arizona or any other state. His real name is Robert Wilkins, and he has warrants outstanding in 3 states for similar fraud schemes targeting families of wealthy individuals." Diana gasped. "How do you know all of that?" "Because we have been investigating him for months," I said. Walsh approached dozens of families in the Phoenix area using the same basic strategy. He identifies successful people through public records and media coverage, then contacts their struggling relatives with promises of easy money through false legal claims. Marcus stopped pacing. "You knew about him before tonight." "I knew about the investigation," I said. "What I did not know was whether my own family had been contacted by him or whether you would be willing to participate in his scheme if he did approach you." Jennifer continued through the speakerphone. "The FBI has been building a case against Wilkins for over a year. Tonight's events, which we recorded with proper legal authority, will provide crucial evidence for his prosecution." Susan leaned forward on the couch. "The FBI? Financial crimes that cross state lines fall under federal jurisdiction," Jennifer explained. "Mr. Wilkins has defrauded victims of over $3 million using variations of this family inheritance scam." I looked around at my family members, noting how their expressions had shifted from confusion to embarrassment to genuine fear. They were beginning to understand the scope of what they had almost become involved in. "The good news," I said, "is that you can avoid criminal charges by cooperating with the federal investigation. The bad news is that your cooperation will be required, not optional." Greg rubbed his face with both hands. "What does cooperation mean?" "It means testifying about how Walsh approached you, what promises he made, and what actions he instructed you to take," Jennifer said. "It means providing all documents he gave you and all communications you had with him. And it means accepting responsibility for your role in tonight's attempted extortion." Marcus finally sat down heavily in the remaining chair. We never meant for it to go this far. We were just so desperate, and he made it sound like Janelle actually owed us the money legally. Desperation makes people vulnerable to exactly this kind of manipulation, I said, which is why the rehabilitation program I offered earlier includes financial counseling and legal education components. Diana wiped her eyes with a tissue. Is that offer still available after everything that happened tonight? Before I could answer, we heard car doors slamming outside. Through the front window, I could see 2 police vehicles and an unmarked sedan that probably belonged to federal agents. The investigation team is here, I said. After we finish with them, we can discuss your future options. The next hour involved detailed statements from each family member about their interactions with Walsh, examination of the documents he had provided, and coordination between local police and federal investigators. Walsh's real identity as Robert Wilkins was confirmed through fingerprints left on the settlement papers, and his pattern of similar crimes in other cities provided context for tonight's events. Agent Sarah Martinez, who led the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, explained that my family's case was particularly valuable because they had recorded Walsh making specific false claims about legal precedents and threatened litigation strategies. Your family will need to testify when this case goes to trial, Agent Martinez told them, but your cooperation tonight has probably prevented other families from becoming his victims. As the law enforcement personnel prepared to leave, Agent Martinez pulled me aside privately. Your plan tonight was risky, she said quietly. If Wilkins had been armed or more violent, this could have ended differently. I had backup plans in place, I said, but I needed to know whether my family was acting out of desperation or genuine malice. Now I have my answer. And what will you do with that answer? I looked back at my family members who were sitting together on the couch in a huddle of shared shame and uncertainty. They had made terrible choices, but they had also been manipulated by a professional predator who exploited their financial desperation and emotional vulnerability. I am going to give them one more chance to accept real help instead of false promises, I said. But this time, they will understand the difference between the two. Agent Martinez nodded and handed me her business card. Call me if you need anything else, and thank you for your cooperation with this investigation. After the police and federal agents departed my family, and I sat in the suddenly quiet living room processing everything that had happened, the dinner table still held my original job offers and rehabilitation program documents waiting for their decision. So, Greg said finally, what happens now? The silence in the living room felt heavier than it had before the police arrived. My family sat together on the couch, united in their shame and uncertainty, while I remained in the chair across from them with my briefcase of documents and employment offers. Diana was the first to break the quiet. Janelle, I need to ask you something directly. Do you actually want to help us, or are you just trying to prove a point about how much better you are than we are? The question caught me off guard with its directness and forced me to examine my own motivations more honestly than I had been willing to do earlier. Both, I said finally. I do want to help you, but I also need you to understand that help requires change. Real change, not just promises to do better next time. Marcus leaned forward, his earlier anger replaced by exhaustion. The gambling thing is worse than I told you. I have been lying about how bad it got. I mortgaged my house 3 times, not once. I borrowed money from loan sharks who are not as patient as banks. If I do not pay them back by Christmas, they are going to break my legs. The confession hung in the air like a physical presence, heavy with implications for everyone in the room. Susan gasped and reached for Greg's hand. How much do you owe them? I asked. $47,000, he said quietly, plus interest that goes up every week I do not pay. Diana looked at her brother with a mixture of horror and recognition. Marcus, why did not you tell us it was that serious? Because I thought Walsh's plan would work, he said. I thought we could get enough money from Janelle to solve everyone's problems at once. I felt a chill as I realized how close my family had come to being victims of multiple predators simultaneously. Walsh was exploiting their desperation for his own profit, but the loan sharks represented a much more immediate physical danger. Diana, I said, "What about your legal situation? How serious are the charges you are facing?" She bounced Sophia gently while choosing her words carefully. The district attorney said they might accept a plea deal if I can pay restitution and complete community service. But if I cannot come up with $23,000 by February, they will prosecute me for felony identity theft. Greg cleared his throat. "Your mother and I are 3 months behind on our mortgage payments. We will lose the house by March if we cannot catch up on $18,000 in back payments." I looked around at all of them, finally understanding the complete scope of their financial crisis. It was not just about wanting money from me. They were facing homelessness, criminal prosecution, and physical violence if their debts were not resolved quickly. "Here's what I am prepared to do," I said, opening my briefcase again. "But you need to understand that this offer comes with conditions that are absolutely non-negotiable." I pulled out a new set of documents that I had prepared for exactly this scenario. I will pay Marcus's loan shark debt immediately to prevent physical harm. I will provide Diana's restitution money to avoid felony prosecution. I will bring Mom and Dad's mortgage current to prevent foreclosure. Relief flooded their faces, but I held up my hand to indicate I was not finished. "In exchange, all 4 of you will enter the rehabilitation program I described earlier. Marcus will check into a residential gambling addiction treatment facility tomorrow morning for a minimum of 90 days. Diana will complete community service and attend financial counseling while I arrange childcare for Sophia. Mom and Dad will attend family therapy and take over Marcus's mortgage payments while he is in treatment." Marcus shook his head. 90 days in residential treatment. I cannot leave my job for 90 days. "You do not have a job," I said bluntly. "You have been unemployed for 6 months, which is how you had time to gamble away your house payments. The treatment facility I have selected offers vocational rehabilitation as part of their program. When you complete it, you will have job skills that do not depend on construction work that hurts your back." Diana wiped fresh tears from her cheeks. "What about Sophia? I cannot be away from her for community service and counseling sessions." The Heritage Suites renovation project includes an on-site childcare facility for employees' children, I said. "Sophia will be safe and well cared for while you complete your legal obligations and learn financial management skills." Susan looked between her children and then at me. "What about our therapy sessions? We've never done anything like that before." Family therapy will help all of us understand how we develop these destructive patterns and how to create healthier relationships going forward, I said. Dr. Patricia Hernandez is one of the best family therapists in Phoenix, and she has experience with addiction and financial dysfunction. Greg frowned. "This still sounds like you want to control every aspect of our lives." "I want to provide structure for your recovery," I corrected. "The difference is that control is something imposed on you against your will, while structure is something you choose to accept because you recognize its value." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red with unshed tears. "The loan sharks gave me until Christmas Eve to pay them. That is 11 days from now. If you do not help me, they really will hurt me." "Then you need to make a decision tonight," I said. "Accept my help with my conditions or find some other solution to your problems." Diana shifted Sophia to her other arm. "If we say yes to everything you are proposing, what guarantee do we have that you will not change the terms later or use our situation to manipulate us?" I pulled out the final document from my briefcase, a legal contract that outlined every aspect of the rehabilitation program and my financial commitments. "This is a binding agreement that protects both of us. I cannot change the terms without your consent, and you cannot opt out of the program requirements without forfeiting my financial assistance." Jennifer's voice came through my phone speaker, again reminding us that she was still monitoring our conversation. The contract also includes provisions for independent mediation if disputes arise and regular progress reviews to ensure the program is meeting everyone's needs. Susan stood up from the couch and walked to the dining room table where she picked up the original job description for the hotel general manager position. $60,000 a year is more than I have ever made in my life. It is also more responsibility than you have ever had, I said. You will be managing a 47-person staff and overseeing a multi-million-dollar operation. The training will be intensive, and the expectations will be high. She nodded slowly. I think I would like to try. Greg joined her at the table, examining the maintenance supervisor job description. $48,000 in full benefits, health insurance, complete health insurance, dental, vision, and a retirement plan with company matching contributions, I confirmed, plus profit sharing if the hotel exceeds revenue projections. Diana looked at the retail coordinator position details. $35,000 is not a lot of money. It is enough to support yourself and Sophia while you rebuild your credit and legal standing, I said. And there are advancement opportunities as the hotel chain expands. Marcus remained on the couch, but he was reading the gambling addiction treatment program information. 90 days seems like a long time. 90 days is the minimum time required to establish new behavioral patterns and develop coping strategies for stress and depression, I said. Some people need longer, but most successful graduates complete the program in 3 to 4 months. The room fell quiet again while each of them considered their individual situations and the collective decision they needed to make. I could see them weighing their desperation against their pride, their fear of change, against their fear of consequences if nothing changed. Finally, Diana spoke for all of them. We accept your offer, all of it. The jobs, the therapy, the treatment programs, everything. Marcus nodded reluctantly. I cannot keep living like this. If residential treatment is what it takes to get my life back, then I will do it. Susan smiled for the first time since I had arrived. I have always wanted to be a hotel manager. I never thought I would get the chance. Greg extended his hand toward me. Thank you, Janelle. We do not deserve this opportunity, but we will not waste it. I shook his hand, then stood to embrace each of them in turn. We all deserve the chance to rebuild our lives when we make mistakes. But rebuilding requires work, and work requires commitment. As I packed my documents back into the briefcase, I felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. The desperation and manipulation that had characterized our earlier interactions had been replaced by tentative hope and genuine gratitude. When do we start? Diana asked. Tomorrow morning, I said. I will pick up Marcus at 8 a.m. for his admission to the treatment facility. Diana, you will meet with the district attorney's office at 10 a.m. to finalize your plea agreement. Mom and Dad will sign the mortgage assistance paperwork at noon and schedule their first therapy appointment. Susan looked around the living room that had been the site of so much conflict and deception. It feels like everything is going to be different. Everything is going to be different, I confirmed, but different in ways that will make you stronger and more independent, not more dependent on other people's money. As I prepared to leave for my hotel, I realized that tonight had not gone according to anyone's original plan, but it had ended in a way that offered genuine hope for healing relationships that had been damaged by years of dysfunction and mutual disappointment. 8 months later, I stood in the lobby of Heritage Suites Phoenix, watching my mother Susan direct the hotel staff with the confident authority of someone who had discovered her true calling. The space around us gleamed with polished marble floors, handcrafted furniture, and original artwork from local artisans that Diana had curated for our retail collection. The transformation had been remarkable, but not without challenges. Marcus had struggled through his first month of residential treatment, experiencing withdrawal symptoms and intense depression as he confronted the full extent of his gambling addiction. There had been nights when he called me sobbing, begging to come home, insisting that the treatment was too difficult and that he could manage his problems on his own. I had driven to the facility twice during those early weeks not to bring him home, but to remind him that recovery required staying committed, even when it felt impossible. Dr. James Rodriguez, the addiction specialist overseeing Marcus's treatment, had warned me that the first 6 weeks would test everyone's resolve. Addicts often sabotage their recovery right when they start making progress. Dr. Rodriguez had explained. They become frightened by the prospect of real change and try to return to familiar patterns, even when those patterns are destructive. Marcus had completed the 90-day program in February and immediately enrolled in the vocational rehabilitation component, learning hospitality management and facility maintenance skills. His hands, which had once shaken with anxiety when he was away from slot machines for more than a few hours, now moved with steady precision as he performed routine maintenance throughout the hotel. Diana's legal situation had been resolved through her plea agreement, but her recovery from shopping addiction and credit fraud had required ongoing counseling and strict financial monitoring. Every purchase above $20 required approval from her financial counselor, and her credit cards had been replaced with a secured debit card that prevented overspending. The hardest part for Diana had been learning to find fulfillment in experiences rather than material possessions. Dr. Patricia Hernandez had worked with her to develop new coping strategies for stress and depression that did not involve spending money she did not have on things she did not need. Retail therapy is not actually therapy. Dr. Hernandez had told our family during one of our weekly sessions. It is an avoidance mechanism that creates temporary pleasure while building long-term problems. Now Diana managed our gift shop with genuine enthusiasm, finding satisfaction in helping guests select meaningful souvenirs and supporting local artists whose work we featured. Her daughter, Sophia, spent her days in our employee childcare facility, where she was thriving under professional supervision, while Diana worked and attended her counseling appointments. My parents had been the most resistant to therapy, initially insisting that their problems were financial rather than psychological. It had taken several sessions before Dr. Hernandez helped them understand that enabling their children's destructive behaviors had been a form of emotional dysfunction, not love. Genuine love sometimes requires allowing people to experience the consequences of their choices, Dr. Hernandez had explained. When parents constantly rescue their adult children from problems, they prevent them from developing the skills necessary to solve their own problems. Greg had flourished in his new role as maintenance supervisor, discovering that his construction experience translated well to hotel operations. His chronic back pain had improved once he was no longer lifting heavy materials all day, and the steady income had eliminated the financial stress that had been affecting his marriage. Susan's transformation had been the most dramatic of all. The woman who had spent 20 years working part-time retail jobs had emerged as a natural leader with excellent instincts for customer service and staff management. She had completed hospitality management courses online and earned her certified hotel administrator designation within 6 months. "I never realized I was capable of this kind of work," she had told me recently. "I always thought I was only good enough for entry-level positions." The hotel's grand reopening celebration was scheduled for this evening, and representatives from the Forbes magazine that had first featured me would be attending to document our family's story of recovery and reconciliation. The irony was not lost on me that the same magazine coverage that had prompted my family's initial attempt at extortion was now celebrating our collaborative success. As the afternoon shift began, I found myself in our employee break room with all 4 family members sharing coffee and reviewing the evening's event schedule. These informal meetings had become a weekly tradition, combining business planning with family bonding in ways that felt natural rather than forced. The Phoenix Tourism Board confirmed that the mayor will attend tonight's ribbon-cutting ceremony. Susan reported consulting her tablet with the professional efficiency she'd developed over the past months. Marcus nodded from his position at the maintenance checklist. All of our systems are running perfectly. The new air conditioning units are performing better than projected, and our energy efficiency ratings exceeded the green building certification requirements. Diana looked up from the inventory reports she was reviewing. The gift shop sales for our pre-opening tours have been exceptional. Local guests are particularly interested in the handcrafted jewelry and pottery from the artists collective we partnered with. Greg, who had been quiet during our discussion, cleared his throat. "I wanted to say something to all of you before tonight's celebration. We turned our attention to him, noting the serious expression on his face. 8 months ago, I thought my life was over, he began. I was facing unemployment foreclosure and the knowledge that I had failed as a father and husband. I blamed everyone except myself for our problems, and I was willing to participate in a scheme to extort money from my own daughter, rather than address my own mistakes. Susan reached for his hand across the table. We all made terrible choices. But Janelle did not give up on us, Greg continued. She could have written us off permanently after what we tried to do, and no one would have criticized her for that decision. Instead, she offered us something more valuable than money. She offered us the chance to rebuild our lives with dignity and purpose. Marcus wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I hated you for the first month, he said to me. I thought you were trying to humiliate us and prove your superiority. It took weeks of therapy before I understood that you were actually trying to save us from destroying ourselves completely. Diana nodded agreement. The hardest part was admitting that our problems were not just bad luck or unfair circumstances. We had to accept responsibility for the choices that created our crisis. I looked around the table at these 4 people who had been strangers to me for years, despite sharing the same DNA. The family dynamics that had made me feel invisible and unimportant during my childhood had been replaced by mutual respect and genuine affection. I learned something important during this process too, I said. I learned that holding on to resentment was preventing me from having the family relationships I actually wanted. I was so focused on proving that I did not need you that I never gave you the chance to prove you could be the family I needed. Susan smiled through her tears. We wasted so many years being proud instead of being honest. The conversation was interrupted by our hotel concierge, who informed us that the first guests for tonight's celebration had begun arriving. We stood together and prepared to present our transformed business and restored family to the community that would judge whether our efforts had been successful. As we walked through the hotel corridors toward the main lobby, I reflected on how different this evening felt from my college graduation 8 years earlier. Tonight, my family would be standing beside me, sharing in the recognition and celebration instead of choosing to be somewhere else. The lobby quickly filled with local dignitaries, business leaders, and members of the media who had come to see Heritage Suites Phoenix and hear our story of family reconciliation through structured rehabilitation rather than simple financial assistance. Mayor Patricia Williams offered brief remarks about the economic impact our hotel would have on the downtown development district, and the Forbes journalist who had originally featured me conducted interviews with each family member about their individual recovery processes. But the moment that meant the most to me came near the end of the evening when Susan approached the podium to thank our guests for attending and to reflect on what the hotel opening represented for our family. 9 months ago, my children and I were facing financial disaster, legal troubles, and the complete breakdown of our family relationships, she said. We had fallen into the trap of believing that money could solve our problems without any effort or change on our part. The room fell quiet as she continued. My daughter Janelle taught us that genuine help requires genuine commitment to change. She did not just give us money, which would have been gone within months. She gave us opportunities to rebuild our lives through work therapy and accountability. Susan paused to look at each of us before continuing. Tonight, we are not just celebrating the opening of a beautiful hotel. We are celebrating the fact that families can heal from serious dysfunction if they are willing to do the difficult work of honest self-examination and behavioral change. The applause that followed felt different from the polite recognition typically given to business openings. It felt like acknowledgement of something deeper and more meaningful than commercial success. As the guests began to leave, our family gathered in the lobby, one final time to appreciate what we had built together. The Heritage Suites Phoenix represented more than a business investment. It represented proof that broken relationships could be repaired through mutual respect, clear boundaries, and shared commitment to growth. What happens next? Diana asked, bouncing Sophia gently as the baby dozed against her shoulder. Next, we continue growing, I said. the business our individual skills and our relationships with each other. But we do it without crises, without manipulation, and without taking each other for granted. Marcus looked around the elegant lobby that he had helped maintain and renovate. I never imagined I could be proud of work like this. I thought construction was the only thing I was good at. You are good at many things, I told him. You just needed the opportunity to discover them in an environment that supported your recovery rather than enabling your addiction. Greg put his arm around Susan's shoulders. Your mother and I talked about this earlier. We want to renew our wedding vows next year after we complete our second year of family therapy. We want to celebrate the marriage we have built during recovery, not just the one we started 35 years ago. The idea touched me deeply because it represented their commitment to continued growth rather than just returning to old patterns once the immediate crisis had passed. As we prepared to lock up the hotel and head home to our respective residences, I realized that the little girl who had sat alone at her graduation ceremony had finally gotten the family celebration she had always wanted. It had just taken 8 years and a completely different kind of achievement to make it happen. The lesson I would carry forward was that genuine love requires both compassion and accountability. Enabling destructive behavior is not kindness. It is a form of cruelty that prevents people from developing their full potential. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is to refuse to participate in their dysfunction, while offering them genuine alternatives that require genuine effort. Money can solve financial problems temporarily, but only personal growth can solve them permanently. The difference between charity and empowerment is that charity maintains dependency, while empowerment builds independence. Our family story was not about a wealthy daughter rescuing her struggling relatives. It was about 5 adults learning to create healthy relationships based on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and shared commitment to each other's success rather than each other's comfortable dysfunction. As I drove back to my own apartment that night, I felt grateful for the painful graduation day that had motivated me to build my business empire, and equally grateful for the family dinner invitation that had given us all the opportunity to build something even more valuable than financial success. We had built the foundation for a family that could celebrate each other's achievements. Instead of competing with them, support each other's growth, instead of enabling each other's weaknesses, and create memories together that would strengthen us rather than divide us. Have you ever had to choose between helping someone in a way that felt good temporarily versus helping them in a way that actually solved their problems permanently? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments about how families can support each other without enabling destructive behaviors. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction, and share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the difference between charity and true empowerment. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to seek genuine solutions rather than temporary fixes in your own relationships and challenges.